Being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just remember why we're here in the first place. The United States has a massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit. So the president declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs. And we're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to work toward resolving that national emergency.
I would just conclude with saying it was done
with them. And this was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just remember.
Wait, what? After months of chaos, 145% tariffs, and economic whiplash, this is what we get. And now they're bragging that this mess was apparently easy to fix? The US-China trade war was supposedly a national emergency. Now we're being told the problem wasn't that big after all. Today, we break down the hypocrisy, the sudden deal, and what really just went down in Geneva. Subscribe for more no BS political breakdowns. It started with drama. Just a month ago, President Trump shocked the global markets by slapping 145% tariffs on nearly all Chinese goods. He framed it as a drastic move to combat a $1.2 trillion trade deficit and declared it a national emergency. That decision didn't just throw US-China relations into disarray. It also sent shockwaves through the global economy, prompting panic in markets and fury from businesses already squeezed by inflation. Expectations were low as top US officials, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jameson Greer, traveled to Switzerland for 2 days of high-stakes talks. The administration itself had downplayed any outcome, calling it a mere first step and tempering hopes of a resolution. But then, boom! With little warning, they emerged from the talks with broad smiles, handshakes, and one key message.
I'm happy to report that we made substantial progress.
Apparently a deal had been reached, but nobody knew what was actually in it.
Confirmed that a deal between the two countries has been reached.
I'm happy to report that we made substantial progress between the United States and China in these very important trade talks. First, I want to thank our Swiss host. The Swiss government has been very kind in providing us this wonderful venue, and I think that led to a great deal of the productivity we've seen. We will be giving details tomorrow, but I can tell you that the talks were productive.
Past interactions with them. And this was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just remember why we're here in the first place. The United States has a massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit. So the president declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs. And we're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to work toward resolving that national emergency.
I would just conclude with saying it was done in the spirit of cooperation, shared interest, mutual respect, and we look forward to sharing the details with you tomorrow morning.
All right, CNN.
This is The Spin. They're now reframing a self-inflicted economic crisis as a diplomatic victory. Even the Commerce Secretary chimed in with economic gymnastics, claiming,
expect a 10% baseline tariff to be in place for the foreseeable future. But don't buy the silly arguments that the U.S. consumer pays. Businesses, their job is to try to sell to the American consumer. And domestically produced products are not going to have that tariff. So the foreigners
going to eat the tariffs?
Finally have to compete. They're going to have to compete. What happens is the businesses and the countries primarily eat the tariff.
Should we buy that?
Seriously? That claim's been debunked by nearly every economist alive. A 145% tariff isn't a negotiation tool. It's a shock tactic. And according to Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff, the American consumer is the one paying the price.
Tariff.
Should we buy that?
No, I mean, that's just nonsense. The consumers are mainly going to pay the tariff. There are certain high-end goods with big markups where the businesses may take some of it. But the evidence is all that the American consumer is going to pay a lot. It's going to put upward pressure on inflation.
Inflation is already high, interest rates are climbing. Now, tariffs are making everything more expensive, while officials pat themselves on the back for a vague deal with no disclosed detail.
And sort of ending this huge uncertainty we've had. But I wouldn't, go dancing about it just yet. Let's see what. But if they reach some certainty, that's going to be a big improvement. I'm skeptical that we're going to get there, anytime before the end of the summer.
And here's the kicker. The president himself was already floating a rollback, suggesting the tariff could be lowered to 80%. Meanwhile, his Commerce Secretary insisted that a 10% baseline tariff would stay in place for all countries. This isn't strategy, it's improvisation. Here's where the cracks in the narrative explode into full view. Amid all the chest thumping about substantial progress, there's one glaring problem. Nobody knows what was actually agreed to. Even CNN's Betsy Klein, reporting live from the White House, couldn't find any real substance behind the spin.
Partners will help resolve the national emergency that President Trump declared in April. Now, Greer, even after these Trump administration officials spent the week really downplaying expectations ahead of these talks, they had characterized them as a positive first step, but said they really did not expect a final deal to be announced this weekend. And Bessent, for his part, had suggested that this was really aimed at de-escalating.
That's right. The administration is calling it a deal, but they're refusing to say what's actually in it.
And the author of the new book, Our Dollar, Your Problem. Professor, great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we don't know the details on this possible trade deal with China, but set the stage for what's at stake for the U.S. economy.
This so-called breakthrough is being treated more like a placeholder, a PR announcement disguised as policy.
Ahead of the Asian markets opening, and perhaps it would start to at least make an impact there, or does it tell you something that details will be revealed instead, as promised tomorrow?
I think moving by tomorrow is already really fast. I mean, there are so many things.
Just when you thought the performance couldn't get more bizarre, the Commerce Secretary dropped one final clanger.
As a national emergency is going to also mean a lot less lending into the United States, which is going to put upward pressure on our interest rates, which are already high.
President Trump has suggested, he may lower the tariff rates, for China down to 80% from 145.
This is textbook gaslighting. Every economist, from the IMF to the FED, has made it crystal clear tariffs are taxes on consumers. But here's Rogoff again, cutting through the nonsense with surgical precision.
Future, but don't buy the silly arguments that the U.S. consumer pays. Businesses, their job is to try to sell to the American consumer. And domestically produced products are not going to have that tariff. So the foreigners are going to finally have to compete. They're going to have...
The administration says this deal was done in mutual respect and shared interest. But the reality? They triggered an economic firestorm, then tried to extinguish it with smoke and mirrors. No details, no transparency, just a neatly timed announcement before the president boards his next foreign trip. It's not diplomacy, it's damage control. Meanwhile, experts like Kenneth Rogoff are warning of long-term inflation, higher interest rates, and massive uncertainty. And the American consumer? Still footing the bill. This wasn't a win, it was a U-turn, one they hope you'll forget by tomorrow morning. Don't fall for it. Subscribe now for more no-nonsense breakdowns, and share this before it gets buried under the next press conference.